Whatever happened to my Transylvanian twist? Yeah, okay. I know that wasn't the greatest Bela Lugosi Dracula impersonation. There have been worse, you know. Well, at least I think they have. Hi guys, welcome to another video. Hope you're all keeping well. In this video, I'd just like to talk about one of Universal's very early monster movies, and that movie is called Dracula from 1931, starring Bela Lugosi. Now, this was the movie in which the late great Hungarian actor Bela Lugosi would make his screen debut, playing Dracula, you know, after having played the role many times in the past on the stage. Now, Dracula also stood right alongside Universal's other classic monster movie, Frankenstein, also released in 1931, in an awesome double bill that started the whole Universal monster movie franchise, you know, on a path that would later become so renowned and loved, you know, by horror fans the world over. I suppose you could call it the incipient stages of the golden age of Universal horror, if you will. Right, a bit of background on this Dracula movie, guys. Now, Dracula is a 1931 American horror film directed and produced by Todd Browning from a screenplay written by Garrick Force. Now, it's actually based on the 1924 stage play Dracula by Hamilton Dean and John L. Balderston, which is adapted from the 1897 classic vampire novel Dracula by Bram Stoker, one of my all-time favourite horror novels, absolute classic. Now, the film stars Bela Lugosi as Count Dracula, Stoker's disarmingly regal but oh so bloodthirsty vampire. Now, we also have a great supporting cast comprising of Edward Van Sloan as Dr. Van Helsing, whom of course is Dracula's archenemy, force for good against Dracula's evil, David Manners and Helen Chandler. Now, this movie was a roaring success and made Lugosi an international star. Now, before I go more into the basic premise of the movie, here's a little fact for you, which you might not have known. Now, the movie was originally released with a rather facetious and self-aware epilogue, in which Edward Van Sloan gives a brief talk to the audience regarding what they have just seen. Now, although this little epilogue was dropped from later prints and not restored for the 2004 DVD release, a short clip is actually included at the conclusion of the documentary The Road to Dracula. Right, with that little bit of trivia out of the way, guys, I'll move on now to relating the general premise of this classic Dracula movie by Universal. Now, the story, of course, revolves around the infamous vampire lord himself, and Bela Lugosi certainly plays Dracula brilliantly in this movie, as I am sure he must also have done when he played him in all those theatre productions on Broadway. Now, the film opens with a scene of Renfield, played by Dwight Fry, who is embarking on a rather harrowing coach ride, you know, along the Borgo Pass through the Carpathian Mountains in Eastern Europe, bound for Dracula's castle. Now, this deviates from the opening of Bram Stoker's novel, in that in the novel it is Jonathan Harker who journeys to Dracula's castle and not Renfield. Now, being a solicitor like Arthur was in the novel, Renfield is travelling to meet Dracula at his castle to discuss a business matter. But what Renfield doesn't know that this client of his, Count Dracula, is actually a vampire. So when he finally arrives at the castle, after foolishly ignoring the warnings from their locals not to venture up there, a familiar horror trope, guys, if ever I saw one, and comes face to face with the charming but rather eccentric Count, he soon finds himself being gradually enveloped by a living nightmare of horror and terror. Well, after all, it is Dracula's castle, isn't it? No house of fun here, guys. This is serious stuff. Now, his sinister intention being to journey to England and set up residence in Carfax Abbey, Dracula hypnotises Renfield into opening a window, and when a bat flies through, Renfield faints with shock. Then, when Dracula's three vampirised brides close in on Renfield with a view to feasting on him, their master Dracula waves them away, only to attack Renfield himself. Now, later on in the film, when he boards the schooner Vesta bound for England, Renfield is by now a raving lunatic and completely under, Dracula's omnipotent power. Now, in true vampire fashion, the Count hides away in a coffin, only to rise up and feed on the whole of the ship's crew during the nocturnal hours, just as he did in the novel, guys. Now, when the ship reaches England, Renfield is found to be the only living person on board. The gibbering lunatic Renfield is then sent to Dr. Seward's sanatorium adjoining Carfax Abbey for treatment. Now, I don't want to give away any more of the plot, guys, in case any of you haven't seen it, but suffice to say that once Dracula sets foot in England, all hell breaks loose, just as it did in the novel, so I'll leave it at there. Now, another little fact for all you guys pertaining to this Dracula movie: in the early days of talkies, Hollywood studios often had a tendency to produce foreign language versions of their films using the same sets and costumes. Now, while Todd Browning filmed during the day, at night George Melford was using the sets to make the Spanish language version of Count Dracula, starring Carlos Villarius, I hope I pronounced that correctly, as Conde Dracula. After having thought to be lost for many years, guys, a print of this Dracula discovered in the 1970s and fully restored to quite a remarkable and pristine condition. Now, this Spanish version can be found on some of the Blu-ray releases of the 1931 English language version of Dracula. Now, I have actually got both versions in my collection, which is really cool. Yeah, absolutely love them. Now, I'd like to move on to all the particular aspects I love about Lugosi's Dracula movie, guys. Now, although I wouldn't go as far as to say that this is my all-time favourite Universal horror movie, there are a few features about it which I really enjoy and are forever etched in my memory. So, number one, apart from the opening theme, guys, there's no actual musical score running through this movie, an omission which I believe was mainly due to budgetary restrictions. Now, in some scenes, the pervading silence is broken only by the occasional faint sound effects in the distance. Now, I think this silence really adds to the general creepiness and dark atmosphere of this movie, and certainly enhances the sheer menace emanating from Count Dracula himself. Really gives it the atmosphere. Number two, the movie established all the horror touchdowns with which we've all become familiar with over the years. For example, the foreboding landscape of Transylvania, the Borgo Pass, the howling wolves, the creepy castle, the villagers' ominous warnings not to venture near the shunned place, where apparently evil lurks and waits. If you want to watch a really atmospheric horror flick, guys, from the 1930s, this is the one to watch. Number three, Bela Lugosi's performance as the vampire count. My favourite Dracula before Christopher Lee came along in 1958. Bela really exuded an unforgettable air of supernatural menace in this role, guys. Now, with his dark, hypnotic eyes, slick black hair and dark attire, he symbolised vividly the popular Universal version of Bram Stoker's immortal creation. Dracula never once blinks his eyes, an effect that enhances the undead character's otherworldly aura, abetted by Bela Lugosi's Dracula figure. I especially love it when, on hearing the howling wolves outside his castle, he utters the immortal line that has become such a big part of Dracula's history. Listen to them, the children of the night. What music they make. Yeah, I don't know, yeah, bad impressions, yeah. Now, this line, of course, was also uttered by the Count in Stoker's novel. Absolutely classic line in horror. Now, for years, we have often heard the legendary familiar story that when Bela Lugosi died in 1956, he was buried wearing one of his many black silk capes, but not the one he wore in Dracula. That one was actually put on auction by his son Bela Lugosi Jr. in 2011. Now, my own personal superlatives aside, this Dracula movie has often been slated by some critics, describing it as quite stiff, stodgy, dated in appearance. Now, some have also criticised Bela Lugosi's, portrayal of the Count himself, describing it as corny, unfrightening, and even quite laughable in parts. especially in terms of the way Dracula speaks. And of course it doesn't help when we think of just how many times this accent has been spoofed in many horror homages over the years. But having said that, I don't think anybody can really take away from the fact that Dracula 1931 was irrefutably such an important movie in terms of starting Universal's golden age of horror. I remember first watching this movie, guys, in the late 60s as a kid, you know, on me old black and white telly, and just like Boris Karloff's Frankenstein film, instantly captivated. These were the movies that made me a horror fan. Yeah. So also, another thing to remember is that the Lugosi Dracula accent is always the one that is repeated the most for new Dracula interpretations. And that in itself bears great testament to just how enduring and unforgettable Lugosi's performance of Dracula was. Certainly a great part of horror movie history that, in my opinion, will probably never fade completely from our recollections of key aspects of Universal's golden age of horror. Now, another point I'd like to make, if I will, here is this. Although, as you all probably know if you've been following my channel, my own personal all-time favourite Dracula is Christopher Lee in the Hammer movies, I do both respect and love Lugosi's portrayal of the Count. I also recognise the important contribution he made, you know, to Universal Pictures in regards to helping them, you know, grow their horror franchise to an extent of phenomenal popularity. Granted, his vampire did not have fangs, it was not quite as demonically snarling and bloody-eyed as Lee's version. However, Lugosi still brought a lot of character, charm and dark menace to the role. And I'm sure that when this movie was first screened way back in 1931, it scared cinema goers just as its sister Universal movie, Frankenstein, starring the late great Boris Karloff, must have done. So there you have it, guys. My full review of Dracula from 1931, starring the late great Bela Lugosi, the best Dracula in the whole Universal, you know, the best Dracula in the whole Universal Dracula franchise, in my opinion, and one of Universal's greatest monsters. Bela Lugosi was really on the money when he played Count Dracula in this classic, and it was a great pity that he didn't go on to play the Count in a few more sequels, guys, aside from his second and only other appearance as the character in Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein from 1948. Now he did, however, play other kinds of Dracula type characters in other movies, such as Return of the Vampire from 1943. Very, very enjoyable movie, yeah. Okay guys, well I hope you enjoyed this video review of Bela Lugosi's Dracula. Yeah, if you like this movie, leave your comments down below. You know, please feel free to, you know, share, subscribe, comments. What's your favourite Dracula movie? I say leave your comments down below, yeah. Yeah, always love talking about my favourite horror movies, especially the Universal ones, guys, yeah. Yeah, so there you go. That's my review of Count Dracula starring Bela Lugosi from 1931. Hope you enjoyed it. Yeah, stay safe, yeah. And all going well. I'll talk to you soon. Okay, guys, that's it for now.